let us be.
Welcome back, the Gallo Show, SuperTalk Mississippi on a Friday morning. Dave Hughes here, and joining us now, he's an entrepreneur down on the coast, the former president and CEO of Gulf Coast Business Council, and most importantly, he's a SuperTalk Mississippi news column contributor. That should lead your resume now, Ashley. Ashley Edwards joins us. How are you doing today, sir?
Hey, I'm doing great, Dave. How are you this morning?
Doing fantastic. Let's get right into it. So, give me your take just right off the top. The whole Matt Gaetz situation. It's been a wild roller coaster of a week with Gaetz. What are your thoughts on how this whole thing unfolded and where we wound up with it?
Well, it probably unlike any presidential appointment in history, it became clear immediately once his name was announced that this was going to be an uphill battle all the way. And it certainly appears that over the past 48, 72 hours or so, there had been a lot of effort by the Trump camp and certainly by Gaetz himself to make some appearances and make some visits with members of the Senate to try to gauge, was this a salvageable nomination? Clearly it wasn't, and I think the things that people have to keep in mind as it relates to this is, Democrats don't have the numbers in the Senate to stop any of Trump's nominations at this point. And so if a nomination is not going to make it, it's not going to make it primarily because there are going to be Republican votes that are going to go the other way. And it was very clear that there were anywhere between 4 and 6 votes that just weren't going to compromise on Gaetz at all. Actually, some very interesting reporting last night from the Bulwark that Gaetz didn't just voluntarily pull his name out of consideration, but that Trump actually called him and had a conversation with him saying, look, the votes just aren't there. This is going to turn into a distraction. We need to go into a different direction. But Gaetz was dead on arrival from almost within 10 minutes of his name being announced. And now, obviously the attention is going to move on to some of the other potential appointments. And I think that there may be a few others that will have some similar fate by the time it's all said and done with.
Hegseth comes screaming to mind because he's facing some of the same kinds of allegations in all of this. By the way, if you want to, I know you enjoy this kind of thing. If you want a fun rabbit hole, go down the full story of that Department of Justice investigation into the sexual allegations of Gaetz. It's a fascinating story that goes back for a while. It goes back to a hostage situation, all sorts. You know the story I'm talking about. Then you've seen that, okay?
Yeah, no,
it's fascinating.
It reads like a Hollywood script, and Gaetz' dad being extorted for money to help fund a hostage rescue in Iran. Even the Florida tax collector. Who just by all accounts was a pretty terrible guy, and kind of helped get Gaetz brought into this whenever his phone was seized by the FBI. I mean, it really is an extensive story. It's an interesting read for folks.
Yeah, that guy's name, if you want to go Google it, was Greenberg, Joel Greenberg, who had actual, honest-to-goodness Florida IDs and driver's license made up for some of these underage girls so that they had proof, literal official proof, that they were of age. This is a lot more complicated than people realize, but let's get back to the political aspect of this. There are a lot of people that are speculating, we'll use that word, that Trump knew this was going to blow up, but he wanted to see who would fight against it in the Senate, so he knew what he was dealing with before he got in. Do you think there's any weight to that?
I think that probably has some merit. It makes someone like me who's been around politics a long time kind of wonder, why would you go into this knowing you're going to take a loss? Certainly Trump's chief of staff, for example, Susie Wiles, she's an old political pro. She knew this thing was never going to make it. And so you ask yourself, why was this going to take a loss? Why would they take a loss? But in some ways, I think this is a kind of early test of who's going to be with me and who's not. And so, even in losing the nomination, to likely Republican no votes, he probably still gets some value and some mileage out of it.
Well, and the follow-up nomination, the backup, as everybody is calling it, well, Bondi, she is an incredibly strong candidate. MSNBC was going nuts yesterday, saying this is horrible. She's going to be much more effective than Gaetz. We're in trouble. It was fantastic to watch that meltdown, but. Even if she was the plan from the word go, and they're trying desperately to scrounge up controversies surrounding her, but it all involves her being an attorney for Trump back in 2020. It's not going to carry the same weight as what they were waving about with Gaetz. This goes back to the thing we have heard for years about Trump playing 4D chess. This is, I think, more likely than some people would give it credit for. That, yeah, he did this on purpose just to see what would happen.
Well, I think it's even more likely when you see someone like Pam Bondi being the next person up, because, the likelihood is she is going to be very confirmable. I would be astonished if she didn't get the votes, given her experience and her resume. So to have someone like that waiting in the wings, who immediately was able to step into the place, you kind of wonder why not put them out right in the beginning. And that, I think, demonstrates that there were some other motives there in floating Gaetz and letting all the cattle scramble, if you will, in Washington.
What do you think is in the future for Gaetz? A lot of the speculation is, Governor DeSantis has to appoint someone to fill Rubio's seat in the Senate. That's a possibility. Ron DeSantis could appoint himself to that Senate seat, and Gaetz could then run for governor. There are a lot of different options here. This could wind up being a win for everybody involved, which is kind of the way Trump likes to see things play out.
My suspicion is that Gaetz probably will not be the Senate appointment. If I was a betting man right now, I would say Laura Trump is in a pretty good position for that. I do think Gaetz has designs on the governor's race, which in Florida is up in 2026, so 2 years from now. So I would not be surprised that if we have not heard the end of Matt Gaetz. Not even fully convinced that he won't take his seat in Congress during the next Congress, even though he's stated his intention to resign. Certainly this could change that calculus, and until he's actually in a position to be seated and chooses not to, that option should still be open to him. There's obviously some consideration of the fact that if he were to go back into Congress, the likelihood is that the ethics committee's reports would be released. And so maybe he wants to avoid that at all costs, especially if he's got a governor's run in his future. But it would not surprise me to see him want to go right back into Congress.
I find myself this week in the very unusual situation of agreeing with Marjorie Taylor Greene. And here's why I say that, because sometimes she's way out there. You know that just like I do. But her point about the Gaetz, examination, the Gaetz report, was that, okay, let's release it, fine. And then let's release the list of people that have used that slush fund in Congress to pay off sexual allegations for other people over the years. It's millions of dollars. I think it's $12 million. She kind of has a point there. If we're going to throw rocks, make sure the house is not made out of glass. And we've been letting a lot of people get away with that for a long time.
Well, look, I think that is very much part of the MAGA brand of politics, and that is, almost engineered chaos to see where the pieces land and to see who's with you and who's against you. And, Marjorie Taylor Greene is pulling a play from that very same playbook at this point. And so, nothing really surprises me as it relates to what this sort of new age in Washington is going to look like. And I think we're going to see more of this. And, I do believe, as I mentioned, in fact, I'll just say I heard a commentator on television the other night say Donald Trump may have single-handedly saved cable news given the confirmation hearings that'll be coming up at the beginning of next year. And that's probably true, because we're probably going to see some confirmation hearings that will make the Kavanaugh hearings of a few years ago look like a walk in the park.
And it kind of brings to my mind the old military saying, when in danger or in doubt, run in circles, scream and shout. Because as long as you're creating chaos and doing something, at least you have a chance to move forward. And that's always been Trump's strategy in a lot of ways. So let's just do stuff. Let's see what happens. We got to be moving before we can change course. You can't steer a docked boat.
No, I was going to say, and the old adage of, hey, if you're going to be talking about me, just make sure you spell my name right. I mean, they love the attention. And so controversy is nothing as long as they have the media's focus and the media narrative and are in the conversation constantly. And he has used that strategy very successfully.
Talking with Ashley Edwards. Can you hang on through the break?
Sure.
Go ahead and get your crystal ball out and dust it off real good. I want to see what you think about the coming chaos as we continue on the Gallo Show on this Friday morning. Keep it here. Sorry, I was just checking the Bitcoin price. I don't have any, so it's almost self-flagellation at this point to keep up with it, but it's getting close to flirting with 100,000. Well, it's been flirting for a while. Get up to 99,500 something early this morning. It's going to top 100 at some point. Anyway, sorry I got off subject because I don't even know why at this point. Ashley Edwards with us. Hopefully you got that crystal ball polished. And the first question is a simple one. Do you see any other surprises coming in nominations from President-elect Donald Trump in the next month or two?
Yes, I do think that we will have some more surprises. I think there will be some other controversial figures. And look, this Republican majority in the Senate is going to be a shaky majority at best, because keep in mind, there are several of those Republican senators who hail from states that Kamala Harris won a few weeks ago, in some cases by a pretty good margin, and who are up for re-election again before the 2028 elections. And so, I think the first rule of Washington politics is Washington politicians are always going to do what's right and best for their reelection first, and then they're going to do what's right and best for the country second. And, I think certainly there is going to be 4 or 5 senators in that mix that are going to be hard pressed to confirm any candidates who are really out there on the edge. And so I do think that we're going to see some more surprises, and I think that we're going to see a few more of these nominations fail. I mean, you mentioned Pete Hegseth earlier. I think that one probably becomes the one that's in the bullseye right now. Maybe Tulsi Gabbard secondarily to that. Tulsi Gabbard, I think, maybe has a little bit more in terms of popular appeal because, she was a presidential candidate at one point. She served in Congress, and so there are some things there that may get her across the finish line, but given some of the allegations that have come to light with Hegseth, and especially given the role of Secretary of Defense, just the importance of that in our sort of institutional system, I think that one is one that I would not bet on passing at this point. In terms of others, when you just hear some of the names that have been floated and you think of some of the other positions that have yet to be filled, I do think that we're going to see some more controversy.
Dan Bongino for our Secret Service director. What do you think?
Yeah, perfect example. There again, potentially one there that will have a little bit more support given his background. I think what's interesting here, Dave, and what just continues to occur to me is this demonstrates very clearly how much Trump values people that have media chops and who have the ability to be on cable TV and talk radio and get lots of clicks. And, in many ways, that sort of public celebrity is more important to him than policy chops or background and qualifications, because he understands that the world that we're living in now is a click-based world. And so he would rather have people who are effective spokespeople for him, rather than people with extensive resumes that make senators really comfortable.
Well, and to be honest, the people with the policy chops got us where we're at. So it might not be the worst way to look at it. I would like to throw one other one out before we mention something else before we get done here, just because I love saying this out loud. We live in a time right now with the nominations where it feels like nothing is off the table. I just want to watch your face when I say this. White House Press Secretary Alex Jones.
It's interesting you say that, but I fully expect that the Roger Stones and Alex Joneses of the world are going to have a central role to play. Let's not forget Steve Bannon being Deputy White House Chief of Staff during the first term. I don't think anything is off limits here.
I think you're exactly right. Now, one other thing I do want to get in before we get done, it's really under the radar for a lot of people, unfortunately, and we have to try to change that. We have an Election Day Tuesday here in Mississippi, and everybody is so focused on what's going on with Trump, we're not really talking about that very much.
Yeah, some really big judicial runoffs still on the ballot. We have a pretty big one down here in coastal Mississippi, and certainly another up there in the Jackson area. And these are important roles. I mean, these judgeships are important roles. They have a very important role to play in our state, and so it will be interesting to see what turnout looks like. Because these runoff races, especially when you don't have extensive runoffs on the ballot, they can be very, very low turnout affairs, and the winner is ultimately going to be decided by who can really get their voters out to the polls. Because these runoffs are not a priority for most voters. In fact, not on most people's radar at all.
And especially happening 2 days before Thanksgiving Day. That doesn't help. So make your plans to get out and vote. Ashley, always enjoyed talking to you. We could sit here and talk about ridiculous conspiracy theories that aren't really ridiculous at all day long. We'll have you back sometime when I'm here, and we can do the entire thing about Gaetz and that whole story, because it is fascinating to me. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend, man.
My pleasure, Dave. Thanks so much.